It's Liza here with episode 32, Rescue from the Rooftop. Welcome to Wonders and Miracles podcast, where we celebrate miraculous moments in everyday lives. I'm your host, Liza Lawrence, a wife, mother, teacher, and miracle lover. If you're new to this podcast, this is what we do here. Each week on Miracle Monday, we celebrate awe-inspiring true stories from regular people like you and me. People who have experienced something surprising and wonderful that could be considered the work of a divine source. My desire is to help us recognize God's hand and His love in our lives, because the more miracles we notice, the more miracles happen. Thanks for listening to the show. Now let's celebrate wonders and miracles together. In Isaiah 25, verse 1, O Lord, thou art my God. I will exalt thee, I will praise thy name, for thou hast done wonderful things. With so many miracle stories in her life, it was hard for Andrea to decide which one to share. After consulting with me, we decided to share 3 powerful miracle stories that helped her know God's hand is guiding her life. Her first story features an out-of-body experience she had with an emergency C-section. Next, when her 5-year-old boy fell off of a 30-foot cliff and landed on the only flat rock on the mountainside, she knew that angels were assisting the accident. And her last story, a boating accident with a rooftop rescue. Thanks for joining me in the movement that miracles still happen. Can't wait to share these with you. But first, I want to give a shout out to the review of the week. This is on iTunes from Gentry MC. They said, "This podcast is one of my favorites. The stories shared are amazing, and they happen to people like you and me. I also love that hearing these stories helps me to remember and see little miracles in my life. Thanks for doing this podcast." Thanks for that review. If you would like to support the podcast and help spread the word, go to iTunes and write a review, and I'll read it on one of my episodes. It does help other people find it when they're searching for new podcasts on iTunes. So thanks for sharing, and thanks for supporting through writing reviews and ratings. I also wanted to give a plug for one of my favorite books, Hearts of the Fathers by Sheldon Lawrence. Because today one of our stories is an out-of-body experience, or sometimes referred to as a near-death experience. This woman actually had a code blue and died on the operating table. So I want to mention this story. If you are into near-death experiences, you would love this book, Hearts of the Fathers. It's a beautiful story that takes us on a journey from darkness into light, from pain into the sweet joy of forgiveness. Inspired by the research of hundreds of true near-death experiences, Hearts of the Fathers will truly change how you see this life and the life hereafter. It's one of my most favorite books. I sobbed when I reached the ending. Truly one of the most satisfying books I've ever read. Here's what other readers have said of this book. Sweet Pea said, "I began reading Hearts of the Fathers the moment I received it from Amazon. I've actually gone back to chapter 1 now with a marker in hand and am highlighting all the profound passages for future reference. It has a screw tape letters meets Pilgrim's Progress meets Over the Garden Wall with a smattering of Return from Tomorrow feel to it, but still stands out as a completely original work and is packed with insightful pearls of wisdom. It's been a long time since I found a book this compelling. It kept me up into the wee hours of the morning. I am left contemplative with a newfound desire to live life more fully, more aware and open to my fellow man." Another review from Lalavi Foster. She says, "If you like the work of authors like C.S. Lewis, you will love this book. Absolutely stunning. The summary of the book does not do justice to the depth and beauty of the story. This is not a book just to read. It is a book to consume. If you have any interest in life after death, forgiveness, or what your purpose on earth is, this is a book for you." So check that book out. I truly highly recommend it. Such a beautiful book. Hearts of the Fathers, you can find it on Amazon.com, or you can find it on my sponsors page at wondersandmiracles.com. All right, well, let's jump into Andrea's stories, and I hope you enjoy this episode. right. Well, we are here with Andrea today from Utah, and she's going to share a story of an emergency C-section where she actually died and had an out-of-body experience. So I'm really excited to hear the details of this story. And Andrea, thank you so much for being willing to share it on the show. And let's hear what happened.
Okay, thank you for having me, Liza. Well, we were living in Idaho at the time, and I was 9 months pregnant, and we had sold our home and were moving to Seattle. And I was very good friends with my OB doctor, and his wife was the nurse. I was best friends with his wife, and he didn't want me to have the baby in Seattle, and the kids had to finish 3 weeks left of school, so he had us live with him. So my 4 kids and myself lived with him while my husband was in Seattle. And I kept having a weird feeling that something was going to happen to this baby, and I couldn't shake it. So the convenience part of this story was that in the middle of the night, I couldn't feel him move anymore, and I had a panic feeling. So I went in and knocked on his door, and I said, I can't feel the baby. And he said, let's go into emergency right now. And he said, I've learned after 40 years being an OB doctor to never ignore a mother's intuition. So he took us immediately to the emergency room, and I called my husband in Seattle and was hoping he would get out to Idaho before we had the baby. Then when we got to the hospital, the doctor did a check with me. He monitored the baby's heart rate, and he realized that every single time I had a contraction, the baby stopped breathing. So he realized that the baby had the cord wrapped around his neck, and the zirconium came out. So he knew the baby was in stress. And so when
And how far along were you?
I was due, I think I was 2 days over.
Okay.
And so then he said, we need to do an emergency C-section. And I was so scared about doing a C-section, but in the process, he tried to avoid me contracting. So he tipped the table upside down. So the bed I was on was tilted upwards. So my legs were up so the baby wouldn't have this pressure. They gave me the epidural with my legs up. So what happened was all of the anesthetic went all the way up to my heart and not below.
Wow.
So as we were going down for this emergency C-section, we were going down the hallway of the hospital, and all of a sudden my husband came in from the airplane, and he found us, and he gave me a prayer going down the hallway that everything would be okay. He prayed over me, and then we went into the emergency. And while I was in there, I kept saying, I can't breathe. It feels like I'm dying. I can't breathe. And then when they started to cut on me to do the C-section, I could feel it.
Oh, my goodness.
I can feel what you're doing. That hurts. But I was also saying, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. And then all of a sudden, I just blacked out. Well, at the same time, they took the baby, and the baby died too. We both had a code blue on us. And so my son died and I died at the same time. But I floated up above my body. I was hanging onto my husband's hand, and I felt I couldn't squeeze his hand. I was looking at his hand and I was trying to squeeze it to say I'm okay. And then that was, I guess, was the code blue, because my hand, I could see my hand was just limp, and I could see he was crying, and he didn't know whether to go with me or with the baby. And I was saying in my mind, go with the baby, go with the baby. I'm okay. But then I realized I'm not okay, because I'm seeing my body down there. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm dead. I think I'm dead, because I'm seeing all of this and I'm up above my body. Oh my gosh, I died. And as soon as I could say enough about that, then I just, boom, went right back in my body.
Wow.
And then my son, I mean, he had a 0 APGAR score, but whatever they did to bring him back and myself back, it was quite a miracle. And the doctor, he was so upset, because he said, this is why I don't ever operate on people I know, because he was so frazzled. It was hard for him to separate our friendship from me dying. It was really hard. But during that C-section, he told my husband, I was my 5th child, and I was older when I had children, almost 40. And he said, I don't think she should have any more kids. We're going to do this C-section. And while we've got her in here doing a C-section, let's just tie her tubes. So my husband signed the papers, and they agreed. And then he came into my room later on that night by himself. And the doctor. Yes. And the doctor said, a force greater than myself would not let me tie your tubes. And he said, I don't think you should have another baby. I advise you not to do this. And he said, you're a complete miracle. That both of you are alive is a complete miracle because of the anesthetic. What it did suffocate me. I couldn't breathe or
Wow.
my lungs. But anyway, he said, you're both a miracle story. And there must be a force greater than all of us that allowed you both to live. And then I got pregnant 2 years later with my other son. So I know now why he didn't let me tie my tubes. I had that other little anxious spirit waiting to come down, but I feel really blessed. That was a huge miracle. And I know God's hand was in all of that. There's absolutely no way that both of us were okay. And we haven't had any after effects of any of that either. So
Yeah.
very blessed.
What happened with the baby? Did they tell you why he died and how they got
No,
him back?
you know how the hospitals really hush about admitting anything's wrong? And really, they didn't want to disclose any of that with the anesthetic either. But that was obvious. I mean, I was tipped upside down and anesthesia went up, So,
Wow.
but they just said, you're so lucky this little boy didn't die. But they wouldn't go into detail on anything.
Wow. When you were out of your body, did you perceive anything? It sounds like, as you tell the story, a little bit more frustration, like, I'm here, I'm okay.
Yes. Yes. It wasn't like I saw a light or anything,
Mm-hmm.
but it was just so weird to be above myself and see them working on me really fast and emergency people coming in and hit me. Oh my gosh, I'm dead. It was a really weird experience.
And what did your husband, what was he thinking when he thought you were dead?
He was sobbing and I couldn't comfort him. He thought he lost both of us.
Yeah, that would have been tragic. I had a similar experience. I had 4 C-sections, and with my 4th baby, the anesthetic went up and I couldn't breathe. And I did the exact same thing. I kept saying, I can't breathe, and panicking. And
Yes.
they ended up putting me out. So I relate to that. It's a tense story that triggers my own birth trauma.
Yes.
What did you learn from that experience? Did you learn any life lessons or anything?
My life lesson was I'm not in charge. And if I was supposed to go, I would have gone. And that God is the ultimate healer. And I really believe that if it's our time to go, we go. And if it's not, that we have great purpose here still on earth. And mine, I can see that I definitely was not done. But I feel like life can be taken at any moment and we just never know, and we can't ever leave with ill feelings because life is so fragile and precious, and to take advantage of every day and see God's hand and the tender mercies in everything and the beauty of life, and be grateful for every day we wake up alive.
That's a great message. I love that. Good lesson to learn. And if we could all learn that, some of us won't learn it through a near-death experience, but if we can learn that from other people's experiences and just become aware of that, I think that's very, very powerful. You have another story that you want to share. This was a hiking accident that happened how many years ago?
Well, my son's almost 22 now, and it happened when he was 5.
Okay. So tell us what happened during this hiking experience.
Okay, so this is the 6th little boy that really wanted to come down and didn't want them to tie my tubes. And he is a really curious, adventuresome little boy and has no fear of danger at all. And we were hiking, which the boys love to hike together. And that was back in the day where they didn't have cell phones. And we were hiking up this big, tall mountain that was probably 25, 30 feet high. And they were in front of me. And I saw in my mind, I felt like God just showed me a little vision of this 5-year-old going over top of my 7-year-old's head and falling down on a rock, that whole 25 feet high. So I got that glimpse in my mind and I said, you guys stop, don't go any further, wait for me, and just stop right there. But the 5-year-old was saying, no, I'm almost there, Mom. I just want to get to the top of the cliff. And I said, no, just stop and wait for me. The 7-year-old stopped, but the 5-year-old did not. And it happened exactly how I saw it in my mind's eye. And he just went up over top of the 7-year-old and fell down 25, 30 feet high, fell on the only rock that was flat. And there were so many jaggedy rocks, and it was not a soft landing. The whole thing was rocks, like little rocks, a ton of them. But this great big rock that stood out was flat on the top. And when he fell, he landed on top of that rock on his head.
Oh.
It was horrifying to watch because there was nothing I could do. And then I ran down to get him. and he had rolled all through those rocks all the way down to the bottom. So it was all bloody, but his head was splurting this blood out of his head. And I didn't have a tourniquet. His shirt was too little to tie around him. And so I just ran down this mountain, and I shouldn't have lifted him, but I didn't want to leave him there. They were too little to leave, but I picked him up, and I was so upset. And we went all the way down that mountain and down to where the car was. It felt like an eternity to get there. And I was praying the whole time, and he was screaming how bad his head hurt, and he just couldn't quit crying, my head, my head. And when we got to the car, I said to my other 7-year-old, I said, you just pray and you ask for angels to get in that back seat with your brother and stop his bleeding and help him stop the pain in his head. So my little 7-year-old was praying, asking for the angels to stop the bleeding. And it did. As soon as he finished his prayer, the bleeding stopped and he stopped crying.
Wow.
And I was a little nervous too, to think if, something was happening, or if he was going into shock, or if he was really an answer to prayer. But regardless, we made it to the hospital without him screaming, and the blood had stopped. He had to get stitches, and he had broken bones. And anyway, when we were finished and they came out of the emergency room, and the doctor came out and said, you are one lucky mother and this is one lucky son. He should have been dead or paralyzed with the way he landed on his head and how far he was. And then my little boy just popped right up and he said, well, it didn't hurt that bad because the angels caught me. That's why I didn't die. And he said, the angels? And he said, yeah, the angels caught me so I didn't hit real hard. And
wow.
Just a matter of fact, like it wasn't a big deal. These angels came and helped him. And anyway, it was a true miracle story. And that same little boy continued to see angels and to see people in his room and to see auras around people. And he, that little experience, the little veil between earth and heaven is very thin for him. And the angels have just been his good little buddies. And he's, have seen people come back. And we had a special needs person that I was friends with ever since elementary. And he passed away, and we called him Uncle Noel. And he said, Mom, Uncle Noel came to me last night and he isn't special needs anymore. He's normal like us.
Oh my gosh. I love that.
And anyway, he thought he was one of the angels that helped save him.
Wow.
Pretty cool.
That is really cool. I'm curious about this. Why do you think you had that flash, that vision of him falling and seeing it before it happened? And then it still happened.
I think it was a warning. I think I was being prepared. And if I would have had a son that listened, I could have avoided having that happen.
Mm-hmm.
But, he has his little agency. But if he would have, then that whole thing could have been prevented.
Interesting. But I love that idea that you were being prepared, because maybe you would have panicked had you not had that warning.
Yes.
Yeah.
My message on that is never ignore a prompting that you have, ever.
Yes.
Even how ridiculous it sounds.
Right. You just don't know what you're preventing or what's happening.
Yeah.
And that's neat that this little boy, now that's 22, has had those kinds of spiritual experiences throughout his life, that he's been more sensitive to that.
Yeah, his life has been spared many, many times because he is fearless. And he's done some pretty crazy things. I just feel like the angels are exhausted watching.
That's so funny. I was just thinking that, like, oh, can he slow down, please?
Yes.
We are working overtime with him.
I know. My girlfriend gave me a comic strip, and we had it on my fridge, and it had angels that were laying all over the couch, and they were just exhausted. And it said, please, can we be in charge of someone else?
I love that. Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
Cute.
That's hilarious.
But he's still alive, so.
Yeah, and he wanted to come. I mean, obviously, from the beginning, that first story of I can't tie your tubes, he obviously has come here for something, for a reason.
But I'm sure the angels are exhausted.
That's funny. What are his life plans? Now I'm curious about this boy.
He has not decided what he wants to be when he grows up right now. So he's listed in the Army. So he's with the National Guard right now, and he's just trying to decide his little journey. But he's still very adventuresome. He keeps me praying a lot.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. You have another story.
I have a million.
Let's just keep going.
I believe that God is in every single person's life. We just have to open our eyes and see it's not a coincidence, that it really is God, that it really is the angels, and that we really do need to give credit to God and all the angels who continually watch over us. I just could constantly tell people, if you were aware and you saw God's hand really is in this, it was not you were lucky. It's not a
Yeah.
coincidence. It is God's hand. They are miracles.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's my whole message too, is become aware that God is everywhere.
And it helps us take the focus off of the gloom and doom and all the yuck that's going on. He's also saying there's just as much good going on. There's
Yes.
many miracles as there is evil. Look at
Right.
the miracles that are happening every day. Focus on that instead of the gloom and doom.
Yep. Totally, totally agree. Well, tell us about your third story. So this was a boating accident. Tell us what happened with that one.
Okay, there was a large group of us, adults and youth, teenagers, that went to Bear Lake. And it is in Utah, and it's a huge body of water, and it's always cold.
Mm-hmm.
And we were all boating, and it was getting around 6 o'clock, getting dusk. Everybody came in for dinner, and we had loaded everything back off of the boats, the life jackets and everything, and everybody was going in. Well, I happened to be the only person that brought a purse. And so I probably had 7 adult people keys in my purse. So I had the purse with me with all of our way home with the keys in my purse.
Wow.
That's part of my story. So we were all coming in, and then an owner of this speedboat that was like really low to the water, he said, hey, do you 4, it was 3 other adults, want to go on just a quick ride around the lake before we go in for dinner? And I'll show you how fast this boat goes. And we were saying, yeah, it was like we were just going to do a 10-minute little ride. So we went on this boat, and we were clear out in the middle of the lake, which is far. And the wind started coming, and it started making big white caps. And we're in this low speedboat, and the water started spraying, and the waves went into the carburetor, and it killed the motor. And so when the boat stopped, these waves kept coming in and filling up the boat. Well, we were trying to get the water out, but that we didn't have anything to do it. And then all of a sudden the boat sunk, and the tip of the boat went up. Well, I went under, and my legs were caught under one of the seats, and I thought I was going to drown. And right then my husband came, and he unhooked me, and I got out, and I was hanging onto this purse with the keys in it with dear life. Like, I can't lose all these people's keys or we will never make it home, because we lived far away from that lake. And I was trying to hang on to this purse that was filling up with water and trying to get unhooked from underneath that seat. And luckily my husband saw me and helped me. And then we tried to pull out the seat so we could float on it, because we had gotten rid of all of the life jackets. There were no life jackets. So with all of the adults, we could pull out one seat, and you could float on it for a little bit, but not more than 2 or 3 people could, because it didn't hold us all. But the white caps were going up higher than we could breathe almost, and we were doggy paddling and trying to swim. And because anyone who's been to Bear Lake know that when it storms, that water is big.
Mm-hmm.
So the waves were high, and it was very, very cold. Everyone panicked and said, we're going to die. We're going to die. We couldn't even see the shore. And one of the ladies just started swimming back and saying, I'm not going to let someone else raise my children, and I'm going to swim back there. And another man was saying, you'll be dead. You can't swim that far. You don't even know where the shore is. And we all need to stay together with the boat. And everyone was crying and kind of panicky. And the guy that owned the boat said, don't leave the boat. We need to stay at the tip of this boat. It's the only way they'll find us. And here I've got this purse around my neck trying to hang on to the keys so that people have a way home. And it was just hard to hold the purse up and hold our bodies up. And we were doggy paddling, and as much as we could, and taking turns getting on this little cushion from the boat. And when we were like all given up because we were exhausted and frozen, I mean, I felt like we were going to go into hypothermia any minute. And then all of a sudden we saw a rescue boat come, and this rescue boat came and got us out. And he told us that a man was on the top of his roof with his binoculars, and he saw our boat go under, and he watched the whole thing happen. And he called this rescue boat to come and get us. The rescue boat had come out once and looked for us all around the lake and could never find us, because it was this tiny tip of a boat. So he came back in and said, I can't find him. And the guy said, I'll get back on the roof and I will direct you to where they are. So he talked him through it, and then he came back and got us. And there's no way that we would have survived if he hadn't showed up when he did, because we were freezing and exhausted. And I don't know how long the time was that lapsed, but it felt forever being in the water. But we were so grateful. And what are the odds of dusk and a man being out on top of his roof with his binoculars?
Right. That seems odd, doesn't it?
Very, very, because everyone was in. There was no one on the water. Nobody was on the water because it was dark. And it was a miracle that he found us. And it was stormy.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've lived on Bear Lake, you know what it's like when a storm hits that water.
Yeah, and how freezing it is. It is
Yes.
so cold. It's never warm. And yeah.
And he couldn't believe we didn't have hypothermia. I mean, he just couldn't believe we survived as long as we did. So well, I think if we hadn't kept doggy paddling, we probably
right. Yeah, that movement kept your blood flowing. Yeah.
Just swimming around the tip of that boat, the whole time, praying someone would save us.
Wow. Did you keep the purse? Did you
have
everyone's keys?
I kept the purse and I had everyone's keys. I was determined no one could get home without me. And my husband just kept saying, let go of that stupid purse. It's a bit more of a nuisance, And it was a noose around my neck, but I kept feeling so responsible for everybody's keys. So I did keep it around.
Wow. That's amazing.
There's a part of me that believed I cannot die. I still have to have babies.
So you hadn't had any children at this time?
No. And I was determined.
It's interesting to see what motivates people to choose life and to keep fighting.
Yes.
And, this other woman saying, I want to raise my children. That was her motivation. And, your motivation too sounds like, well, I'm going to have children and I've got these keys. Did the other people have different motivations? Do you know?
I'm not really quite sure what everybody's motivation was. My husband said he was the same as I was, but I'm not sure the other guy.
Yeah.
In fact, the guy who owned the speedboat ended up dying, sawing a tree, and the saw ricocheted and killed him. So he died shortly after that, which was really fascinating to me that he had both those experiences and then the other one killed him. So
how interesting. Yeah.
But he was totally inactive. And then that experience showed him there was a God. And so he came back to church and got really activated in the church and really went gung-ho on it and praising God and everything, and then died shortly after that. So maybe he had that experience to help him realize there was a God,
I love that. And I do think God does things like that to wake us up sometimes. Yeah. Oh, wow. What beautiful stories. I love all of those. And I really appreciate you sharing all those stories with us.
Oh, I could just stand on a mountaintop and praise God for all the miracles that are in my life every single day, no matter how big, small. I couldn't make it through this world without God and my angels. So if I can get on a show and tell everybody that there is a God and there are angels and we're not alone and we are protected and all we need to do is ask for help and take time to be still and listen, we can feel the presence of God in our lives every day.
I love it. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
You are so welcome. It's an honor to be able to share my love for God. So thank you for allowing that.
Yeah, well, thank you. So that's our episode. I just love Andrea's passion for God and angels and how she is so aware that God is in the details of her lives and helping her all the time. And I loved how she said, if we are still, we can recognize him. I think that's a very powerful message as well, which is why I love Christian meditation. So if you are wanting to learn how to still your mind so that you can feel the presence of God in your life and notice him, check out Meditations on the Mount. These are Bible-based guided meditations that help still your mind so that you can feel the Lord's presence in your life. I also want to wish Andrea and her husband safety and success on their mission. They're heading on a mission trip in April and continuing to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ around the world. So I wish you all the best with that. Also, if you have a miracle story that you'd like to share on the podcast, just go to my website at wondersandmiracles.com and submit your story. I would love to hear how God has shown up in your life. Remember in Isaiah 25 verse 1, it says, O Lord, thou art my God. I will exalt thee. I will praise thy name, for thou hast done wonderful things. And I hope you can think of a time when you have been aware of God's help and have wanted to praise His name. And as always, remember to notice and celebrate the miracles everywhere, because the more miracles we notice, the more miracles happen.